Hey, everybody. Melissa and Melissa coming to you today. I am excited about our conversation today because we're really going to be leaning into how to really process emotions so that they don't get stuck in the body and create the basis for dis-ease.
I love it.
This is something that's just I help my clients with it all the time. Melissa helps her clients with it all the time. This is a very integral piece of who we are as humans and how we go through life. And I've recently been reading a book. I just shared this with Melissa, but I've been reading this book and it's really challenged me on a lot of areas. And one is emotions. So I'm really great with other people's emotions, with helping them process. I'm really comfortable with all of that. I do it every day in my work. But processing my own emotions is where I am getting challenged. And I love the challenge because anytime there comes a challenge like that, it's an invitation to up level, to learn a new skill, to really lean in and help myself be a better person. So I'm excited to talk with you today about this because Melissa, you've got such a depth of knowledge here, and in so many ways, you help people every day, not just in your practice around mental health and mental wellness, but also in your dance studio to help kiddos and young adults really process what's happening in their bodies. So would you share a little bit about that and how you see that like emotion being stuck in the body, then becoming a thing that is a real link between what's happening in the body as far as wellness and even in the emotional space and in the mental space? Wow, that's
Sure.
a lot of questions.
No,
Sorry.
well, me too, because Melissa knows I just keep static drainage and massage. Whenever she does facial work, I look like I'm flipping like 20 when I leave her. But, I think that also speaks to how
Mhm,
everything's so connected, right? Like,
mhm. Yeah.
so, body work is so important. So I'll
Mhm.
start with a story, I guess, from grad school because so my master's is specifically in dance movement therapy. I completed all the coursework to do my LMHC also, but it was kind of like a dual program. And so I was at one of my internships, and it was like a halfway house for kids. And I had this young lady I was working with who had quite a bit of sexual trauma. And, you're reading all this content, and it's talking about how, if people have gone through something like that, they'll typically be really restricted through their like rib and like torso area.
Mhm.
So she kind of kept, she'd always want to play the same like two songs. And, she was definitely lower functioning than her age. And so I remember one day I sat her down on the floor and we just started to do some isolations. And I just had her literally start circling her rib cage.
Mm.
Prior to that, she had never spoken about what had happened, DCS
Mhm.
because of reports. But our next session, she came with all this writing about what had happened. So
Wow.
it was such a crystal clear example of
Mm.
that, like what we're talking about, right? And so
Mhm. Yeah.
and hopefully most of us haven't gone through something like that, although unfortunately there's lots of folks who have. Um, and think of people who, you're tight through your neck, right? Or
Mhm.
your hips are tight. The hips are a
Mhm.
center for emotional constructs, right? And so,
Mhm.
we have an adult program at the studio. And honestly, part of what I do is stretch the heck out of them because they don't stretch. Most of them are working,
Mhm.
or even if they're on their feet, they're not taking the time to stretch. Maybe they are working out, but I know for me, like stretching is so vitally important, but especially again, those hip parses. And it's interesting when I was in high school, when I probably was struggling the most to deal with my emotions, I had torn both my hip flexors, right? So
Oh,
no surprise when you think about just like how much I was trying to suppress things. And then, sure, of course, they snapped, right? And so, and those again are like clear tangibles, but I think what we see certainly at the studio, and you're so right in that, we live in our bodies, but I think a lot of times we're kind of disconnected from it.
mhm,
And again, it doesn't have to be something trauma based. It could just be kind of day
mhm.
to day conditioning, right? And so, obviously I have a
Yeah,
lot of teen girls, and part of what I have to do is make sure they're in proper alignment for ballet to be able to execute, right? And, oftentimes I find there's a lot of things going on in their pelvic floor, um, which is common for women in general, because obviously there's a lot that goes on in there, right? But just making them even aware of it and how they can control it just empowers them, but also puts them in proper alignment to be able to execute, right? And so, sure, they're coming for dance class, but it's also about, how do we kind of, just help support them physically and learn how to be in their body.
yeah,
Dance are artists who use our bodies as our mediums, right? But I think there's just so often that we kind of forget those basics. And then with our therapeutic population, I'm often just trying to get eye contact, getting them to like, interact with each other. Um, it's interesting how some of those kids, have such unrestricted movement. They're so
mhm.
themselves. Others are so rigid. But it definitely can tell me a lot about how it's going to be to work with that kid. And or even like I have a young lady who's really high functioning on the spectrum. She's a wonderful dancer. She's actually in my advanced program, but she never really settles over the balls of her feet. She's really ungrounded, right? And
Mm,
so part of what we're working on is just that weight placement so she can be more stable. But then one of my other teens, when I pointed that out, was like, oh my gosh, I do that too. And it does, it can tell a lot of stories, right? And I think it's really important, and even where we hold weight, right? Like
mhm.
I think there's, so much to that. I was just reading yesterday about, stress, creates a lot of stomach fat, right? And sure, it's hormone linked and stuff, as you know, but I think of so many people that I know, especially at a certain age, it's like the rest of them could be pretty fit, but then they've got a lot of weight in their middle. And, again, what's going on there, right? So, and I
Mhm.
think for the folks that I know that are, healthiest across the board, they're really looking at all those quadrants, the emotional, spiritual, physical, and then obviously our nutrition and everything too, right? But I think, yeah, there's a lot of untold stories in there for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And I love how you use movement to help release some of those stories.
Yeah, yeah.
So one of the things that I've noticed in my work is so side by side with what you've noticed in your work. Because, like, for example, I work with a lot of people who have some long-term chronic illness, autoimmune illness, right? So this story just comes to the forefront for me in this chat because I was working with this precious gal who had fibromyalgia, advanced fibromyalgia, right? So it's so multifaceted. It's not like there's one thing that drives fibromyalgia. It is just a rich um cacophony, if you will, of things that can
Very,
lead into that, right?
yeah.
And so we'd been working together for quite some time. She was doing really great. And then we kind of started to hit a wall, like her body started to stall out in the healing process. And so I just started gently asking questions and holding space for her. And we did some work, somatic work, really helping release emotion from the body. Like I think with her, I used tapping, we used some deep breathing, and we're going to give you guys some tools today as well. But really helping her do that. And then the next session, here came the story, right? Deep, deep trauma. And it was after that that her body was like, okay, I'm ready to go. And her healing journey resumed. But it was like until she was able to really process that. And we actually, I don't do um like uh mental health work. I can hold space and ask questions, but to do the deeper stuff, somebody like Melissa needs to come in. And for this gal, we found a local therapist that fit really well for her. She felt really safe with this person. So they continued that journey together. But in that moment, it's like that part of her heart and of her hurt needed to be heard and recognized. And so, as I'm like nearly every person that I've ever worked with that has a deep autoimmune condition, there is this piece.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
it can't be left unattended. So, for example, people that have been abandoned, people who have experienced a lot of anger or shame, anything that's related to that, or intense fear of being unsafe, I always look in their liver
Mm-hmm.
because that liver holds so much. And when we're able to start moving systems in the body, helping everything to flow better, that's when often the body starts to release not just toxicity or sluggishness or all the things we work on physically or physiologically. It also begins to release or give the opportunity for the client to release emotional stuff, um, trauma, all the parts and pieces. And at least for today, one of my intentions of having this conversation was letting you know that having emotion is a gift. It's your body's way to express what it's feeling. And when we tamp it down and we go, I can't feel it, I can't do it, I can't, whatever, because we don't know how to, or we feel like we're not allowed to, it's not safe to express our emotions, or they're too big, we don't know what to do with them. And you can probably line off some more things, uh, tick off some more things of why we would potentially not want to let that emotion flow. But I think for most of us, it's that we don't know what to do with it. Often those emotions feel really big and we don't have tools to process them.
And I think we have to stop the shame around it, because I think, when I work with kids, they can really take ownership of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I
Mm-hmm.
think, oh, it can feel like, why can't I handle this?
Yeah.
And
Oh, I
so,
hear that a lot too.
yeah, and
Yeah.
or so much, and we can barrel through a lot of things, you guys, and your body will get you to certain points until finally you have to look at things.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I can speak to that personally, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
uh, fibromyalgia is an interesting diagnosis because it's actually so heavily mentally based.
Yeah.
It really came about
Mm-hmm.
because it was this mixture of symptoms and no one could really pinpoint what it was. But
Mm-hmm.
it's seen with people that have massive trauma and depression, right? And
Mm-hmm.
um so it's really more of a psychosomatic disorder than truly physical. um it's manifesting physically for sure, but
Mm-hmm.
emotional work is pivotal inside of that. So yeah, I think, you know well, I think, one of the things I'll even share, that I've been working on some big things over the last couple of years, and I had gone for a massage with another gal. And due to the high level of emotional trauma I experienced pretty much for 4 decades straight, she was working on my sternum, and
Mm.
I was pulling my shoulders back but I created basically a muscle casing around my heart to protect it.
Mm.
So I created this additional wall around it as a means of trying to prevent additional
Mhm.
emotional trauma. It was incredibly painful as she worked on opening that, as you can imagine, but um, obviously really necessary, and that's the thing too.
Mhm.
Times we do have to do some more additional actual body,
Mhm. Yeah.
if we these things up over time, can
Mhm.
just expedite things for sure. We did a couple sessions and really focused on that, and it made a massive difference. But you know, that's definitely something, a good massage therapist will understand that. You and I both know not every practitioner may really get it
Yeah.
on that, but that's the goal, you guys, if you're looking for someone to do that kind of body work, someone who really understands that,
Yeah.
maybe got like an East meets West kind of vibe. Um,
Mhm.
and but it's simple too. I know forever ago, one of my yoga teachers who didn't, just kind of gently was trying to get me to do some heart openers. She'd have me just put my block like behind my shoulder blades and lay on it.
Mhm. Mhm.
There's definitely things that you guys can do, and stretches. You don't want to kind of dive right in. For her to do that work, I was at a point where I was ready, right?
Yeah.
But this lighter level work over the last, 16 years, trying to open up that area certainly had started and led me to that point, right? So,
Yeah.
um, but I think really talking, like it's like you said, it's going to be a wraparound system, right? So if folks are
Yeah.
already with you, okay, why am I experiencing this pain here?
Mhm. Yeah.
Having someone to help with the emotional support side of it, because you got to do something with that, right?
Yeah.
And that awareness is so healing, and the awareness isn't created, you guys, to have any sort of judgment around it, and I think,
Mhm.
we were talking before as we hopped on, it's like I think especially for women it can feel scary to be vulnerable. We
Mhm. Yeah.
as a society,
Yeah.
sure, we women be independent and blah blah blah, and that's all well and great, but at the same time we got to remember, like, our original role was being nurturing, right? And there's a softness to femininity that is really special and unique, and we shouldn't want to like make that go away, right? And so how do we lean into that, while
Mhm.
still being smart and strong and independent and business owners
Yeah.
and whatever to be, right? Because it still takes a lot of strength to be a woman, but it's done in such a special, unique way.
Mhm.
And that's something that can't just be, fabricated and duplicated, right? And so
Yeah.
I think the sorry, someone was trying to call me. I think that's where, leaning into how that can look and being okay with that,
Mhm.
it's super
Yeah.
scary. You've been through emotional trauma, Melissa, and I can certainly respect that. But you'll feel so much better, you guys, because it does actually get exhausting to keep kind of like,
Mm.
that
Holding it
word.
in.
Yeah, yeah, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, so you really need to be able to
Mm.
talk about how can I let both those sides shine.
Yeah.
You know? Um, and it's cool because once you can get that balance, I think everyone feels better.
Yeah. So we're running out of time, but I want to leave you with this. And I love that you just said awareness. I'm kind of holding on to that word. So when you feel emotion coming into the body, this is one thing that I'm learning just gently for myself is not to judge or go, why can't I get through this? Or, all the things we say in our head, but just literally notice it, be aware of it, be aware where you're feeling that emotion in the body, whether it's here, whether it's in your belly, whether it's in your hips, whether it's in your knees, whether it's in here, whether it's in your head, your ears, it doesn't matter. Just sit with that and notice where you're feeling that in your body. And you don't necessarily need to do anything with it at this point. Just being aware of where you feel that can be enough to help your body process it and not internalize it. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we're here to
Awesome.
help you. So certainly reach out, let us support you and help you through this. And we'd love to help you
Yeah.
now.
Awesome. Well, thank you for this conversation, Melissa. I
Thank you,
love
my
it.
friend.
I love
Hope
our
you
chats.
have a good day.
Awesome. You guys all take care.
Bye, guys.
Bye.